My name is Sheridan Taylor, not Taylor Sheridan. He wrote Yellowstone. I wrote a different book. I've been living in Cochrane now for almost exactly 7 years. My wife and I and our then 2-week-old son moved to Cochrane to get further away from my previous life and get closer to her family and start a new life as our family and a new one for my son Trace. I am a veteran, the son of a veteran, the grandson, the great-grandson, on both sides of veterans. And we are Indigenous on both sides. I was born into trauma. My parents didn't set out to do that, nor did theirs, nor did theirs, nor did theirs. But we didn't know better. I grew up in the 70s in northern Alberta, an Indigenous child, attending Catholic school, which is a whole different story. Res school light, we could call it, I suppose. When I was a child, we talk about intergenerational trauma for the First Nations. And it's a real thing. It's very valid, very true. But it's not just the First Nations. We as a species have been doing this to ourselves for millennia. Traumatizing the next generation by not allowing our children to express what they need to express because they're feeling what they're feeling in their body. When I was a boy, in the 70s, when dinosaurs walked the earth, and as a man in North America, heavily tattooed, overcompensating man in North America, I'm allowed to feel 4 things. I'm allowed to feel tired. I'm allowed to feel hungry. I'm allowed to feel horny, and I'm allowed to feel angry. I'm not allowed to feel scared. I'm allowed to feel sad. I'm allowed to feel lonely. And young girls in my time, and still today, are taught that they can feel everything, they can't express it, and they're not allowed to feel angry. Young girls, young women want to be sweet and gentle and kind and demure, be victims. Can't be who you are. So we teach our children that these sensations in their body, these physiological responses, these cascades of neurochemicals flooding their body, these hormones being released and synapses opening and closing in their brain that we call emotions, are a flaw. So our children grow up thinking, I grew up thinking, I'm not as good as, I'm less than. I have no value or worth because I'm feeling these things, and that makes these people upset with me. And we still do that. Right now my son is in therapy and taking medication because for the first 4 years of his life, I responded to his every emotion with rage. I passed on the trauma. I first knew I was different when I was prepubescent. I was first diagnosed in 2012, and I laughed at it. I first surrendered to it in 2014 when my first wife died. Malnutrition. An eating disorder killed her. We met when we were children. She was 17, I was 18. 2 very broken children, but the broken pieces, after a little bit of abrasion, told you I'd cry. They fit. And for 20 years, things were really, really good. And then they weren't. Because that's how mental illness works. Everything's okay. Everything's good until it's not, and then it's really not. I don't know if the wars did it, if my pieces chipped first, or hers chipped first, or... So she died. And what little tenuous hold on sanity I had, I let go. I didn't need it anymore anyway. I was going to kill myself anyway. And it's easier to do that when you let go of sanity. I started to drink again. I was taught by example, and then I was explicitly taught, you feel bad, go drink. You'll feel better. What an odd thing. Not just like for that, but like in general. Your body is doing something it's supposed to do. It's having an internal reaction to external stimuli that it's supposed to do. But we don't want you to have that, so put this poison in your brain that causes your brain to feel like it's something else, and then it will release those hormones. It's very complicated. It's cancel culture. You know why it's so evil and so powerful? Because banishment is the greatest punishment a human can experience. We are so wired for connection, that if we were to hold hands for as little as 10 seconds, our brains begin to release oxytocin, serotonin. Our brains reward us for connection. We need it. I need you. And if I don't have that connection with my therapist, I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not vulnerable. I'm not going to heal. If I'm not strong enough to be vulnerable, drop my guard completely, all my defenses, and be open and honest about all the awful stuff that I don't want to share with you, you can't give me the positive social validation and feedback that I require to be okay with the sensations in my body that we call emotions, and therefore they won't go away. They'll just stay all stuck and balled up, pushed down, trapped, eating at me from the inside. I have learned to just let myself feel what I'm feeling. I have learned to share what I'm feeling. I started sharing it on social media posts to try and take away stigma from others like me. And I started sharing my thoughts and feelings about thoughts and feelings with my sons in emails that they will open up someday. And I was writing what I knew about the science of what I was learning in letters and emails. And then a couple years ago, I smashed it all together in a book. A vehicle for expressing my emotions. I write a lot now. I speak. Sometimes impromptu speeches in supermarkets, and sometimes very carefully crafted scenarios like this. And I just let my body do what it wants to do to release the sensation it's experiencing. If I gotta cry, I cry. If I gotta dance, I dance. I'm not a good dancer. I'm 52 years old with bad hips and knees. I don't care. And you know what's funny? No one else does either. Crying is actually the healthiest thing we can do. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system and brings us out of fight or flight. When I cry, you want to cry. Always hold my hand. Not to stop the crying, just to sit with me in it until it goes away. And if I start dancing in a supermarket, not everyone jumps in and dances along with me. But if I'm dancing in the supermarket aisle with my kid, somebody does. Every time. Somebody does. Usually a grandma or a Coco. Cocos are great when it's dancing time. We talk a lot about mental health and mental well-being of somebody who's struggling. And we're beginning to start a conversation about those who are caring for those who are struggling. And it's always centered around what that caregiver person can do for the struggling person. Well, it comes down to one basic thing, really. Just don't try to fix them. Don't try to change them. Just be with them as much as you can, for as long as you can, when you can. When I was at my absolute worst, when I was completely lost in pain and trauma and loneliness and all the ugliness and awfulness and everything, I was contagious. You wouldn't catch it if I sneezed on you. But if you spent a lot of time with me, I would infect you. It's called caregiver fatigue. It's called vicarious trauma. We pass it along to the next generation, which I did to my son, who is getting much better. Doing all the right stuff for him now. He's a remarkable little creature. If you are living alongside someone struggling with PTSD, then PTSD lives with you too. And you will, both of you, build patterns of behavior. That's happiness. That will perpetuate and reinforce. And then you will have two people living together very much alone. Isolation. And isolation breeds mental illness. And then a young woman exploded into my life, took over my life, and thereby saved my life. So I have a whole different roller coaster of emotions now, but to shorten all that up, in due course of time, my son was born. And I was completely lost in trauma, but trying as hard as I could to not pass that along. I failed at that, but we'll get to that later. He's why I started to try to get better. I resolved at that point I would not pass this on. The cycle would stop with me. I didn't know how to parent, so I read 7 parenting books back to back. I did the most important thing right. I tried. I didn't know how to dad, but I tried. I tried to stop old patterns. And then one day, I reached the point where I had to either kill myself or do something about it. It made sense to kill myself at the time because I was just going to make my child like me anyways. The best possible course of action is take myself out of his life forever. Surrendered to the fact that I needed medication to control my body's responses to external stimuli and stop having anxiety attacks and flashbacks. Work on therapy. Changing how I saw me. Learning to be okay with the fact that I'm not always okay. Recognizing that not everyone is okay all the time. In fact, no one is. And I realized at one point, one day, working in the jail I was working at the time, that if I didn't want my son to be who I was, and I wasn't going to kill myself because that's not going to make anything better for anyone, then I have to be someone I want my son to be. I was very fortunate in getting the help. I stumbled into the right avenues. The therapist that I called was a young lady that I had met the week prior and had been incredibly rude to. But she's a professional, and she's there because she cares deeply. You have to take care of yourself if you are a caregiver. And you have to take care of yourself if you are this one who's struggling. You are responsible to take care of everyone in your life as best you can. And that starts with you. There is a reason you put the oxygen mask on yourself first. There is a reason that the first lesson in first aid is scene survey. Is it safe to go in? If you are drowning, you cannot throw anyone a lifeline. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of each other.